Senator Graham, you served on the Weapon of Mass Destruction Committee, the WMD Commission, I think a lot of people call it, tasked with finding ways to prevent the proliferation of WMD around the world, particularly in the hands of terrorist organizations. How likely is it that we're going to see some form of WMD, nuclear, biological, chemical, set loose upon the earth here in the next 2 or 3 years?
Two of our key findings, and this was a group, I chaired the commission. It had 9 members, Republicans, Democrats, people with a military, intelligence, political background. We concluded first that as things stand today, it is better than a 50-50 chance that there will be a weapon of mass destruction used someplace on Earth before the end of the year 2013.
2013.
So that's roughly less than 2.5 years.
Better than 50%.
Better than 50%. Number 2, we found that it was more likely that that weapon would be a biological weapon rather than a nuclear weapon, in large part because the biological weapon is so much more accessible, easier to transport, easier to execute than a nuclear.
And that could be anywhere on the globe. Let's talk a little closer to home. You've been looking for some time now at the intelligence gathering capabilities of the United States, and I think you were involved quite a bit in looking at homeland security and so forth. How much have we improved in our ability to protect our homeland since 9/11, in your opinion?
I think we've made considerable progress, particularly on the nuclear side. What concerns me is this greater likelihood of biological. There is a follow-on group to the WMD Commission which periodically issues a report card. And the last time we did this, which was about 18 months ago, we gave the United States an F in terms of its level of preparation for a biological attack. So that's been the primary area that we've been focused on, and we will issue another report card to see how much progress has been made in October.
All right, let's talk about another area that you've done yeoman's work in, for Florida especially. You served on the commission charged with investigating the causes of the BP oil spill. And I know we could spend 2 days on this, but in brief summary, what were the major causes of that oil spill, in your opinion?
The major causes were, first, there has been an industry-wide culture that didn't place safety as a very high priority. It was surprising to me to learn that for every one death in the North Sea, which is a much more formidable environment than the Gulf of Mexico. For every one death there, we've had 5 deaths in the Gulf of Mexico. That's just a dramatic example of the difference in safety standards. Second, we found that there were a whole series of events that occurred on that platform, the Deepwater Horizon rig, in the hours before the explosion, which were the final nail in the coffin. We found that it was a totally preventable, avoidable accident. We made a number of recommendations as to what could be done to try to dramatically reduce the likelihood of a repetition. I'm disappointed, frankly, that neither the industry nor the Congress has, in my judgment, adequately seen this not only as a tragedy, but as an opportunity to substantially improve their operations, particularly as it relates to human safety and environmental protection.
I think I've read somewhere that you stated that there are other high-profile industries, maybe even the nuclear energy industry and others, that have seen it important to raise their safety standards and so forth to prevent disasters. Why not the oil industry drilling in environmentally sensitive lands and engaged in deep water drilling?
Well, I don't really know the answer to that question, because you're absolutely right. For instance, commercial aviation, as recently as the 1950s, more than 50% of the American people would not fly on a commercial airliner because they didn't think it was safe. Today, there may be reasons not to fly, but concern over safety is not typically one of them. The chemical industry, after the tragic event in Bhopal, India, substantially increased its safety standards. The commercial nuclear power industry has substantially increased its standards. We think that those are all examples that the offshore oil and gas industry should follow. Why they haven't done it, I think it goes back to this culture of the wildcatter. Most of the people who are currently doing offshore oil are the sons, daughters, grandsons, granddaughters of the people who went out with a few bucks in their pocket in East Texas, punched a hole in the ground. If they found it, they were instant millionaires. If they didn't, they were broke, but they'd come back as soon as they got some more dollars in their blue jeans. That attitude has continued to prevail and has discouraged real concerns or investments in those things that would make the whole offshore operation significantly safer, at least as safe as it is in the North Sea.
Does that mean that you don't think deep water drilling should resume?
No, I think that it can resume and really must resume. We're now getting somewhere between 25 and 35% of all our domestic petroleum out of the Gulf of Mexico. We frankly don't have the option of just shutting that thing down. What I think we do have the obligation to do is, as we are going in deeper and deeper waters, and the Macondo event, the explosion, occurred at about 18,000 feet below the surface of the water. There are now operations that are going to be 25 to 30,000 feet below the water. There has not been a commensurate improvement in process and safety practices as we've gone out into these increasingly risky, very deep areas.
Are there any circumstances in which you could ever support drilling in Gulf waters close to Florida shores?
The answer is no. First, it would be extremely degrading to the thing that has made Florida such a tourist attraction, which is the quality of our waters, the quality of the beautiful vistas. Second, it's unnecessary in that there's been very few geologists who would say there was a substantial amount of oil there in the first place. And finally, I think the national policy ought to be to begin to husband some of our domestic supply. The current estimate is that if we proceed on a drill, baby, drill philosophy, we will draw the last drop of oil out of the United States in about the year 2031. If we continue at the current rate, which is about a 50-50 domestic and international, we'll draw the last drop out in the year 2064. So we don't have that much domestic petroleum left. We ought to be saving some of it for a national emergency or to avoid us ever being in a position of totally dependent on international sources of supply.
Senator, we've got about 3 minutes left. I want to talk about a totally different kind of book that you've written, something I know you care a lot about because you spend a lot of time doing it. The title of the book is America, the Owner's Manual, Making Government Work for You. And you've been spending a lot of time engaged in civics education. And let me ask you this, why'd you write this book?
I wrote that book because I had taught a class at Carroll City Senior High School in Dade County to a group of students on the topic of what does a citizen need to know to make democracy work. I found initially the students were sort of befuddled with what these skills that would make them better citizens. But once they got into it, they became very enthusiastic because it was teaching civics not just as some theory like federalism or separation of powers, but the things that really made a difference to them, like quality of food in their school cafeteria. They didn't think that that was a political issue.
I read about the pizza.
Yeah. So that was the inspiration for this book, to try to provide to students and teachers a means of teaching about citizenship that was interesting to students and would make them better lifetime citizens.
Well, you know, Senator, there's so many people, young people and even people in the business world, who when you say the word politics, they kind of get an ugly face. They like, I don't want anything to do with it. That's not for me. I can't make a difference. This book tries to tell them how they can make a difference and why they should. What thoughts do you have about that you would share with somebody that has that kind of attitude?
Well, the attitude that you can't fight City Hall is very widely held. In this book, every chapter starts with a case study of how a person, not much different than any citizen in our state, can make a difference on a very tough issue. For instance, there was one lady whose name was Barbara Capitman, who basically saved South Beach and made it what it is today. There was another woman who had a daughter killed by a drunk driver, who started Mothers Against Drunk Driving and dramatically reduced the number of deaths due to drunk driving in America.
I've got to stop you there. I'd love us to go further. 3 books, people, that you will enjoy. Keys to the Kingdom, it's a novel by Senator Bob Graham. Intelligence Matters, which is nonfiction, about the CIA, the FBI, Saudi Arabia, and the failure of America's war on terror. And America, the Owner's Manual. Read them. They're good. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much, Steve.